Do you want to do any introduction, or do you want me to just dive in?
Let me give a 20-second introduction. Uh,
Cool.
I've known Chris since the late 1990s, and in the last 6 years or so, he sort of disappeared. There would be occasional contact, but he went into reclusion. But it wasn't reclusion, it was involvement in a very large project, Wishdragon. And so it just so happens that you get the next hour or so hearing from Chris what he's been working on. Chris, I'll turn
Thank
off the
you.
microphone for the time being.
What I'm going to show you guys today is kind of just the crazy journey of how this movie got made. You know, originally, somebody was asking about the release date. Originally, the movie was supposed to come out last month. So I had to kind of tweak this presentation because there's only so many things I can show you guys. Obviously, before the movie comes out, I can't play whole sequences or things like that. So I'm going to show you as many goodies as I can. I think the other thing I always felt a little bit weird about as a white dude from a very small town in Idaho making a movie about contemporary China. And I think on the surface that seems a little weird. I think the story I'll tell you about today is a little bit of how the movie came to be and how personal it is to me. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. The origins of the movie started about, well, almost 20 years ago. This person in the photo here is Ben Zhu. He was one of my best friends when I went to art center, and his mom was kind of like my surrogate. I lived in Los Angeles away from my family, and so I would go to Ben's house sometimes, and she would cook for us, and we would hang out, and kind of became like a surrogate family here in Los Angeles. And maybe sometime in my mid-20s, I went to China with Ben for some work. We were doing a design job, and I was totally blown away by the country. This was probably 2006, something like that. And I got to meet Ben's cousin, Michael, who's the guy here in the middle photo. And Michael's the exact same age as me, and he's born and raised in Shanghai. And he just turned out to basically be like a clone of me if I was born in Shanghai. We're just like, everything about us is the same. We think the same. We like the same things. We have the same kind of demeanor. So we just became weirdly good friends really fast. And over the next 10 years, while I was sort of working on my career in the animation industry, I would always be checking in with Michael, and he would be telling me about his life. And it was really fascinating. He had aspects to his life. He was a middle-class guy, and he fell in love with a girl from a really rich family, and there was lots of drama and heartbreak. And even in the course of those 10 years, I was seeing all of China totally transforming, modernizing overnight. And so at some point, it occurred to me that the Aladdin story would be such an interesting vehicle to talk about modern China and what it's like to live there, to grow up there. It's a place where money and success and kind of commercialization have really exploded, and a place with some really interesting old values. So I had this idea of, could we set the Aladdin story in modern China? That was it, pretty much. And it turns out the Aladdin story is actually a Chinese story. Before it was ever part of the Arabian Nights, it was a myth from the far, far western part of China that kind of got folded in. So this was the napkin sketch I did, I forget, on a plane ride or something. And I took that and I started thinking about it, and it really got interesting to me. And I would call up Ben and I would ask him questions, and we would talk about the story. And I did a little painting, and I didn't know exactly where any of this was going to go, but I knew it would be something about a young man growing up in modern Shanghai and a very old dragon who could grant wishes. And so I took that very simple pitch and I worked it into like a short, I guess you could say like a 2-page treatment for a movie. There was a lot of interest. Actually, all the big studios wanted to do it, and that was really exciting, but something felt off. I didn't feel like I was in any position to do this movie with a Western studio. It didn't feel right. So I did some more homework and talk with my agent, and eventually we found the studio called Base, which was at that time a Beijing VFX studio, a really good one. And so I met with them. I went with their president, and they had just this amazing team of young, you can see some of these people in the photos, these young 90s generation Chinese creatives, and they were so into the concept, and they had so many great insights and opinions that I felt like, oh gosh, this is the kind of people I need. And so I decided to try to make the movie with them. Looking back, that is an insane decision because they didn't even have a single piece of animation studio or pipeline, but we just kind of believed in it, and we knew that that the story was cool and that maybe we could make it work. So what happened next is I went on a research trip. So I flew over to China, and I spent a month in Shanghai and Beijing, a couple other places, researching and digesting and trying to figure out if this idea that I had of a story really made any sense. And it was amazing. I would go around with a couple translators from base, and the way we would get people to talk is we would say, hey, if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? And it turns out when you do that, it gets very personal, very fast. So we had these kind of amazing conversations with total strangers about their lives and their kids and their hopes and their dreams. And in the course of doing that, we interviewed these 3 kids. And this was actually in Beijing, but you know, we asked them, hey dudes, what's your if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? And this first kid, he was done in like 5 seconds, like, oh, I want a BMW, and I want a PlayStation 4, and I want a better apartment down by the nice neighborhood. And he was like, bye. Okay. And then this kid he kind of treated it like a homework assignment. So he was like, I wish there was peace in the world. And we're like, okay, that's cute. But the middle kid, he stood there literally for 5 minutes, silently thinking about this question. And he was thinking so hard about it, staring into space. And at some point I was like, I should probably tell him that I can't actually grant this wish. But after a long silence, he said, I wish that my parents were younger so that I could spend more of my life with them and they could spend more of their life with me. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? And something about him and his answer and his whole demeanor, it just struck me. And I remember reading a long time ago, Miyazaki had said when he makes movies, he thinks about his audience, but often he tries to make them of one person. And he made Spirited Away, I believe, for his niece, and he'd known her at a certain part in her life, and so he felt like that story would really relate to her. And so I thought, well, this is my kid. This is this kid who seems like this incredibly sensitive soul who's entering into this modern world of China, and like, how's he going to do it? And I felt like I knew who I was writing for. And on top of that, I was able to digest just how wild the landscape of modern China is. This is in Shanghai. This lady on the left here is 102 years old. She looks like she's 65, and this is her little her little Shikumen apartment and her outdoor kitchen, and she's a total happy sweetheart. And then literally this is the Dolce & Gabbana superstore, which if you just turn 180 degrees around is literally across the street. So wherever you would go, there was this crazy contrast of wealth and of transformation. But this was actually a billboard for some luxury hotel that was in the middle of this old Chinese neighborhood, and that ended up being an inspiration. That literally, this is a screenshot from the film in which one of the characters talks to a billboard, which is a big glamorous image juxtaposed in the middle of his humble little neighborhood. So it was just mining for gold conversations, characters, and people, and it was an incredible experience. I just barely scratched the surface, but I felt like it gave me enough material to go and write the script. So I spent about 6 to 7 months writing the script. And I should say this wasn't the first script I wrote. I'd sold 2 projects before and written those scripts. So I felt like I put in my miles as a writer prior to this. And that made a big difference in terms of not making too many beginner mistakes. But once I had that script, we started to basically enter what I think of as sort of phase 2, which is development or pre-production, which encompasses story, design, editorial. You're basically going to start to shape the film in a serious way. And to do that, I started building a team here in Los Angeles because we wanted to do the pre-production in LA because the resources were there and we didn't have enough ready to go in China to recruit those kind of talents. I don't think that's true anymore. I think those talents now exist in China, but this was a long time ago. This is Aaron Warner, our amazing producer, if you can see in the middle. Here's Arthur Fong with his eyes closed. You guys probably know Arthur. He's a genius. I hope he's not here because I hate saying nice things about him. This is Rad, who is our head of story. This is Sophie, who is our amazing producer on the China side, who bridged the gap. And there's a bunch more people that I don't have time for today, but with this team, we made a second research trip to China with a lot more specific things that we wanted to dig into, right? We had a script, we had locations and scenes, and so we went around and we would do drawings on location of some of these neighborhoods and people. And I can't tell you how priceless that was. I mean, these are Rad's great little drawings. This is some concept art from later in the production based on a place that we stood around and photographed and drew. And all those little details that make something authentic are so important. You have to digest them in person to really appreciate them. And the other thing about China is it's so vibrant. It's so full of surprising, weird things that you can't make stuff up. It's more interesting than one you'd make up. So we went to this old neighborhood that was half demolished, and there was just literally a door. The staircase had been knocked down, and it went to nowhere. And we were struck by that. And Arthur came back, and he did a painting of one of these old things. And it was such a surreal, wonderful image that felt like, yes, now we have a reason to animate this movie. It's not just a live action movie. We're going to take all these cool things and we're going to push them. And we would meet people. This lady who literally like grabbed us by the arm and dragged us into her apartment because she wanted to show us everything. She was hilarious. She was really tough. And she became a real inspiration for our mom character in the story, even down to the haircut and some of the mannerisms. Oh, this is Arthur with his look-alike on the billboard. And this is Aaron with his first encounter with a pig's head. It has been shrink wrapped. So incredible experiences, lots more to digest and kind of prepare us for, the experience of building off of the script. Then we came back and we assembled this team in LA. We used Aaron's offices in Silver Lake, and we also used the Titmouse offices. They were a really great partner for us. We set up shop there and used a lot of their talent and a lot of their producerial help. This is Rad and Josh. There's, if you guys know, April Liu and Helen Chen and Ben, and it's probably a team of about 20 people, storyboard artists, art department, editorial. And we set about the process of making an animatic. This is the wonderful Darren Holmes, who was our editor for a couple of years. He's done things like The Iron Giant, if you've ever heard of that. And this is Aaron looking at our calendar and our schedule for story, and his hair turning grayer. And we basically started to board the movie. Rad and Josh and all kinds of people. This is a wonderful storyboard artist, Zane Yarborough. These are Josh's hilarious boards. We had a great board artist who worked remotely named Bridget Underwood. We had a great storyboard artist named Ron who lived in China, who worked for us. And we just started fleshing out the movie. You guys know a little bit about that process. It's probably the hardest part, just millions and millions of drawings and panels and hours spent in editorial. All of even though you've written a script and hopefully the script makes sense, the story changes, it evolves, it reveals things to you. This is a little chart. There was a point maybe about 6 months in where we kind of finally figured out how our two main characters, how their arcs could be the most powerful and how their stories could be the most clear. And so this was a little diagram we had of different scenes and what their emotional state was and where their heads were at and what their essential arc was. The boy, the main character, is a very humane person who's very insecure about his values, and he kind of comes of age. And the dragon is basically a terrible person. He's a really funny, selfish, like a Tony Stark character, who's materialistic and not very happy, and he changes a lot too under the influence of this kid. So those are it's the most important stuff. If you don't have this stuff, all of the other things don't matter. Story is king, and it was a really great team and a really long journey. Probably spent about a year to a year and a half putting together several screenings to learn all that stuff. And I should say, actually, speaking as a director and as the person who had conceived this project and started to build a team around it, this script's really important. I used the script to recruit people. You know, Arthur was working at DreamWorks, Rad was at DreamWorks, Josh was at Blue Sky. These are people who had great jobs with good salaries, and the only reason that they bothered to leave those jobs and come work on this was because they cared about the story. Arthur read it. I remember I was trying to get Arthur to join, and he read it. And then we met up for coffee, and he was kind of quiet, and he's like, well, I read your script. And it kind of reminded me of my relationship with my mom. And I fucking cried at the end. So yeah, I'll do your stupid movie. And so I got him on board. And that was very similar with everybody. People joined the movie because they believed in some part of it. And you need that. If you just have people there as mercenaries, you're never going to make anything good. So at the same time, we were doing all that story work. We were developing the look of the film. I got Helen. If you guys don't know Helen, you all know Helen. Who are we joking? She's amazing. She grew up. I think she spent the first, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years of her life in China and then moved here, similar to Ben. Anyways, she's amazing. She joined both for maybe 6 months and then a long time as a freelance person. And this was one of her first paintings. I just said, basically, Helen, paint something that evokes the memories of your childhood, that captures the feelings and the textures and the patterns. And she knew the story and she knew things about it. And so she did something like that. And it's just amazing. And there's all these little details in there that they don't even mean anything to me, but if you show this to somebody who grew up in China in the 90s, they'll be pointing them out and appreciating them. There were 2 other Chinese American artists, April Liu and Vincent Lau, who both, even though they were in the art department, they would do these little sketches from their own childhoods or their own memories, kind of taking the elements of the story that we were working on and melting them together with things that they did growing up. And that's something that I think is really important, and it speaks to when you see some of these movies like Mulan or Abominable. I think having a crew that is genuinely not just trying to be authentic, but actually has a lived experience is essential. As much as I want to understand China, even if I spent the rest of my life trying to do that, I could only get 5% down into the layers. And so if your crew has a lived experience, it just shows up for free. And it's so great, so much better than something I would come up with. So I think that was a really essential ingredient. And at the same time, we worked on character designs. The amazing Heidi Smith, if you don't know her, she's awesome. Done so many beautiful drawings and helped us refine the characters and come up with a specific look. We all know Kay Asadera, who did some beautiful paintings for us that are just colorful and inspiring. And also, I think I'm a big believer in departments mixing, because it doesn't happen a lot in big studios. It gets very bifurcated, and people aren't allowed to, oh, you're a storyboard artist, you're not a designer, or you're a designer, you don't do story. Well, these little drawings, and these are Josh's drawings. He's a storyboard artist, but he's a great designer, and he came up with this whole concept of Long having this sort of angular shapes to his body. So he wasn't your typical S-curve design. And he has a whole philosophy about how Long moves and how he poses himself and how you use him as a character to compose your shots, to create clear storytelling. This goes all the way back to characters like Ka from the Jungle Book. And I was so lucky to have somebody in the story department who loves animation and who thinks a little bit like an animator. And so he saw this character. He's like, this fucking opportunity is amazing to do a character that can move like this, basically a flying furry snake. So that would influence design, which would then feed story, which would feed back into design. This was a little drawing that April made from something that she remembered doing when she was a kid, which Josh thought was so adorable that he boarded it into a sequence, or I think Rad boarded this. And that ends up as a scene in the final movie, which is super cute, and always gets a reaction from our audience, our crew in China, because they have these similar memories. And in other respects, I think one of the things you need to do as a director is you need to hire people who are going to make your ideas better. If they just do what you already did, it's not enough. All these studios that make a high-level animation, they don't just board a script, right? They're full of hundreds of really smart people who add on top of each other's ideas. So these are the pages I wrote for the first time the dragon meets. And then Rad would take that, and as he boarded it, he would invent all kinds of hilarious shit that I had never thought of. You know, the dragon using his own tail as a staircase and scaling up to be humongous, things like that. That is the advantage of great board artists, is that they're going to plus everything you do, and you need them to do that. And that, you know, Jeff Turley, another amazing biz dev artist that we had, saw this sequence. He's like, oh, please let me paint that. And so he went off and did a cool sequence painting to try and explore the look and the feel of that sequence. So it's just it's this feedback loop that happens. And that's the only way you get a movie to the highest level, especially in animation. The other thing I think as a director is you do need some vision. You need to provide some direction to people. And if you've done your job right, you have some vision. This is the incredibly shitty drawing that I made of the sequence of these two kids when they're growing up in the 90s as best friends in the old Shikaman neighborhood. And I said, Helen, I don't know, something like this, you know, with the vibes of the Shikaman. And so Helen painted this, which, you know, is pretty much what I was going to paint if I had enough time and like 10 years to get better at painting. And then I would give something like this to Jeff Turley. I literally just held this up to the Zoom of the note card up and said, I don't know, something like this at the end, very sweet, and closure of these two characters. And then he would send back this painting. So it's a talent business. You have to inspire these artists, and you have to recruit them so that they understand what it is that the film needs from them, and they can provide their own inspiration. And you, in little ways, it matters that as a director, you have specific ideas. I remember I held this up for Jeff, and I said, I don't know, it's shitty drawing, but something like this. And then he emailed me like a couple of days later. He's like, hey, could you scan that and send it to me? Because I remember there was a feeling to the way the dragon was sort of hugging, but not quite comfortable hugging. It felt a little bit, I really like that. I want to capture that in my painting. And so it doesn't mean that it'd be great if you had the time to go and do all the paintings yourself, but it is really important that when you give direction, there are specifics, that there are things in that the artist that you're delegating to find moving, find that motivating. So at the end of that process, which is about a year to a year and a half, we had completed rough character designs for the essential characters in the movie. We had done an incredible amount of work to stylize the world and come up with a version of modern China that was worthy of an animated film rather than just regular old live action. And we'd come up with, oh gosh, a good 40 sequence paintings. If you remind me, we can look at those later, that captured the kind of key moments in the story, that tell the story visually. And these are essential, I think, not only for selling the movie going forward, but also it's a test. If your movie is good, it should be able to make sense visually without a lot of explanation. You won't get all the details, but you should be able to kind of follow what the heck's going on. And so a lot of these were just, as we'd work on the script and the story, a storyboard would stand out as a key moment, or I would have a specific scene that I really felt was important. I do a little thumbnail like you guys saw. And then finally, the most important thing, which is the full animatic. It is the hardest part. It's quite something. And you guys have all sat through bad animated movies, and you know how awful it is and boring and painful. So to string together the character arcs of all these characters and relationships and visuals and camera, it is the biggest challenge, and I think it's also the most important proof of concept. I think at this point we had probably spent maybe $2 to $3 million getting all of this work done, which, to be honest, is what some animation studios will pay for like one draft of a script from a famous writer, which I think is silly most of the time. And there are so many things. There's so many things that can't be captured on the written page that make animation work. And so I think in Animatic, if it was up to me, I think studios would develop things a lot quicker, that move towards animatics and use that as kind of an early proof of concept. So we managed to do that. And with that full package, we were ready for the next step. We quickly got interest from the wonderful people at Sony Pictures Animation. And so on the China side, we also got interest from Jackie Chan's big production group called Sparkle Roll. So between these three partners, we were pretty much had the people and the money to go into production, actually make this movie. And so the only problem was this was our studio in Xiamen, which is in Southeast China. This was our studio in China at the time that we entered production. These are the first two people we hired, Pencil and Alex. And we had to basically build a studio as we made the movie. This is like trying to build a car while you're driving it around the track. Don't ever try to do this. This is a stupid idea. But we didn't really have any choice if we wanted to make the movie in China. And so we just dove in. I moved to China. This was the person in front of me on my flight, my first flight over to live in China, which tells you all you need to know about the wonderful variety of people. And we assembled a crew there in China pretty quickly. Olivier Stapelas is our head of character animation, who's this genius right here, if you can see on the right. And we have Shelley Wan became our production designer on the second half of the movie because Arthur couldn't move to China. She left Pixar and joined, and she's amazing. If you guys don't know her work, she's a longtime Pixar designer who basically moved to China with me and just put the entire art department on her back and pretty much carried it for 2.5 years. And we recruited a lot of people from Oriental DreamWorks, from some of the upstart Chinese animation studios. And again, the exact same thing, which is they left the jobs that they had because they saw the promise of this movie and because they cared about it. It made them feel something. And as you guys know, this is this really intense stage of taking all your art and your character designs, which like, oh, they seem so cute, and like, how hard could it be? We've got it all figured out. And then you have to make them smile and move, and you have to make production models. And this was some wonderful work that Borja, who's, I forget Borja's last name, he lives in Spain. He's a wonderful animator designer. He worked with Leo Sanchez, who's another modeler, has his own studio, freelance studio. So we started just pulling talent to China and also reaching out to our network of talent and friends that we had that had all the skill sets we needed. You know, at the time, I think we've seen some really good examples of this now. I was looking at the trailer for the moon, I forget what it's called, Over the Moon, the Netflix film that I saw some stuff that Minkyu and Xiun had done for that. I think that's really great interpretation of Asian faces in animation, which when we started, there weren't a lot of good examples. You know, maybe one or two in Big Hero 6, but for the most part, it hadn't really been solved. So we really wanted to get that both in the eye shapes and the expressions and the small things that make a Asian character, in this case a Chinese kid, look Chinese. We wanted to capture that and still retain some of the fundamental things that you need for an animated face to work, right? You need to give more real estate to the eyes. You need to give more real estate to the brow, things like that. So it was really fun. It was really challenging. We looked at a lot of other stuff like Lupin and other Miyazaki things that we felt were charming, and started to build actual assets and surface them that would be our actors in the movie. Long was, we could do like an entire day just talking about Long. He was really hard. Our VFX soup had come from DreamWorks, and he joined the movie and he watched the animatic, and he said, if you guys were at DreamWorks, they would never have let you do this character. He's too hard and he's too complicated. They would have shut you down and said, well, you can't make him, because Long does a lot of things. He scales, he twists and turns in crazy ways, and he's covered in pink fur. So it's like a technical nightmare. And we just dug in and just went moment by moment, problem by problem, tried to solve him, tried to come up with solutions, you know, even down to little details like the groom on his muzzle, trying to follow the patterns of like an actual animal, a cat or a coyote or something. So it didn't look like a giant stuffed animal, but like a real living creature. And finally, we got to the point where we could start exploring him as a 3D character in different poses and different angles, expressing things in different ways. And we have just such an amazing animation team there that embraced this challenge. One of the hardest things about Long is we basically, you know, when we storyboarded him, we just treated him as a 2D character, which is great because that allows you, as you remember from Josh's little drawings, it allows you to really design him and make him easy to look at, right? He's a shape more than anything. that is so hard in 3D. It's a nightmare and involves all kinds of cheating and faking and having multiple versions of long in the same shot. So credit to our team that they were able to sort of figure that out. And as we're doing that, we have to continue and build on this stylized world, and really, really refine our language, make it consistent, from, you know, the biggest things, that skyline of Pudong, how did we want to stylize that so that it felt magical and not literal, to like the bowl of soup that his mom would hand him when he comes home from school. The worst part was I had my art department rounds every day at the very end of the day, like 6 o'clock, and I didn't eat during the day. I was just too busy. So I would be so starving. And then I'd go to the art department reviews, and Jason, one of our Chinese artists, did these just the most fucking delicious paintings. And I would literally had to like leave the meeting and go get dinner because it was so painful. So it's what I love about animation, that you guys appreciate it, because you work inside the industry. No one else does. It's almost impossible to remember when you watch the movie that it's all made up and none of it ever existed. It was just from a skyscraper to a bowl of soup. We created it all, the world's biggest puppet show. And as we were doing that, I would be flying back to LA, where we were finally able to cast the movie and start getting our final voice performances into the animatic, which is really great. It was a bit of a struggle. It's funny to think back now because it wouldn't even be a debate now, but 4 years ago, we had to push to get a fully Asian American cast. And the people we got were so great. This is Jimmy Wong, who's a young, genius, hilarious actor. He is the main character. This is John Cho, who I'm in the middle of annoying so that he will sound annoyed when he reads his lines. He plays Long. He did an awesome job, just so great. And all these guys were, I can't say enough good things about how professional they were, how flexible, how if we asked them to do 68 takes, they would do 69. Just really diligent, really talented. This is Constance Wu, who played the mom. This is Bobby Lee and Jimmy O Yang. If you know these guys, they have some small roles. They're both awesome comedians. A lot of that actually had to happen over like basically what we're doing now, because of distance. This is recording Natasha, who was our voice for Lena, the girl. She was in Australia and I was in Shanghai, and so we did an awful lot of Skyping before it was something that we all had to do. And then in the course of that, we also had this great team of on our China side at base, who basically had to translate everything we'd done into Mandarin in the most authentic possible way. I wish we could have animated in Mandarin. It just wasn't, nobody was willing to do that at that time. I don't know if it'd be different now. And we also made a Mandarin version of the animatic, the storyboarded version, as a proof of concept that this movie could work in Mandarin and for Chinese audiences. So this is Mrs. Su is our amazing voice director, and these are all the voice actors that worked for us doing that. This is the little adorable kid who played Din, the main character, when he was a little boy. And then we got Jackie involved to do the voice of Long. You know, I can't say enough. I can't say I've ever been more impressed by somebody's professionalism. He's like the most famous actor in China, and he would come to the recording sessions, and he would go 2-3 hours longer than we had booked for without even saying a word. And he would, just when I was stressing out that maybe we were asking him to do too many takes, he would say, "No, I think I can do better," and he'd do 10 more takes. And you know, Jackie's Mandarin is not his first language; it's Cantonese, so his Mandarin is pretty hard to pronounce, if you guys know. And Jackie not only had to try and play the character and capture the emotion, but he had to constantly remember his Mandarin tones and his pronunciation. So at one point, I was apologizing to him for like how many times we were having to try things, and he's like, "Chris, when I do a stunt, you know, I do 150 takes with a board hitting me in the face before I get the perfect one. So it's not that hard for me to do 50 takes of somebody saying a line of dialogue." But I think what we had in him as a partner was something really important, which is he watched the movie, the animatic, and he said, "This is a good movie. And it's so hard to make a good movie. I know, because I've been doing it for 30 years. What do you guys need? How can we help you?" So with all that in place, we could finally fucking start animating. We did some really early tests of Long, just to figure out, again, all the things we talked about, how we could get him to move and what his personality could be. We have some really wonderful animators in China, also some that came from India that were just amazing. And so down to shape this character, and so excited to do the kind of things that you can do with a character like this, that you know, talking on one part of the screen while bringing your tail down on another part of the screen and doing something entirely different. And they were so full of ideas about that, and so great. And also, I think it was really important. We had a couple amazing female animators in China who brought a personality to the female characters that I think would never have come from a bunch of dudes sitting around trying to do that. And I think they also had small things about the way that they would perform with Lena, the female lead, that were specific to Chinese culture, and that, you know, reminded me of all the Korean dramas I used to watch, and the different mannerisms, how you hold yourself and how you behave. So that kind of stuff, again, it goes to, you just couldn't do that in Santa Monica. This is another test, just trying to figure out how it's going to work when Long is in the same shot as these other characters. And then I remember we finally got the first couple of shots of Long done, and we got the surfacing to work, and we got the lighting to work. I'll let you watch this for a second.
You're quite a simple fellow, aren't you? Not to worry. Here's one the peasant folk always love. I can allow you to speak with a loved one on the other side of China.
Hey, I'm a loved one, but I can't hear you because you're very far away on the other side of China. There's a wall over here. It's pretty cool, but I don't know what's going on.
This was a moment where, like, well, maybe we can actually do this. And the tricks that are going on here to make this happen, I think there are 13 longs in this shot. And we're actually hiding, like, inside the camera move, we're hiding a set change to an entirely different version of the set because we couldn't afford to light everything at once. So you have to get to this point where you feel like you have a character who, I mean, you're making a movie star, right? That's the point of all this, out of nothing. And so at some point you have to put that up on screen and say, is this character charming, fluid, seamless, charismatic, technically efficient enough to warrant 90 minutes of people's attention? And then it was basically the craziness that is production, which is you just have quotas and you have so many feet of animation you have to do every week, and so many shots you need to get through lighting, and it just becomes a crazy challenge to maintain quality and to capture the story before you run out of time and money. This is of our crew shooting reference for themselves. So that's their little reference video. We made a little room for them to shoot it in.
I am your mother.
No! And then you can see the final shot.
Magnificent.
Shrimp chips. Peasant food, no doubt. Magnificent.
And there's just hours and hours and hours of this stuff. And it was really cool. I have to say that we had animators from India and every part of China and LA, and they all mixed together, and they all got this story, and they got these characters, and they worked together, and they laughed, and that combination shows up in the movie. Hopefully it's authentically Chinese in some ways, and in other ways it's hopefully very universal. But this was kind of it's fun, it's really hard work, but as you guys know, and if you love animation, it's because you love this stuff. You're about to die the whole time, but also it's some of the most fun you ever have. And so getting to make this entire movie with this group of people was a real treat. And every shot, basically it comes down to every shot in the movie has to go from that original drawing into layout to get a believable composition in 3D and your camera work and everything like that. And then it has to go and be animated with your real models and all the challenges that come with that. And then you have to go and put in lighting and make sure it still looks cool, and all the things you cheated that get exposed when you light it, you have to fix. And of course, none of that is possible without somebody like Shelley, who did literally like 1,000 color keys just about every shot in the movie, so that when the lighters get that animation, they have a essential clear setups to work off of. And again, you get to this point, it's another little clip where you're able to execute on something that you saw in storyboards that was, we go back to those script pages, to the things that Rad boarded. It's quite a journey to make that actually work. You can see all the other little business that he comes up with, the little twinkle toes and the flex and all this stuff that that was inspired by some of the vocalization that John was doing when he recorded the voice. So again, just layers on layers on layers. And at this point, we're probably, gosh, 250 people. This was our crew photo, I think, last summer or the summer before last. And it's just like sprinting, like no one's sleeping. Everyone's a little grumpy. And you're just trying to keep the quality and make the movie that you all care about in time. To not go insane, we did lots of fun things together. We got together and learned how to make a certain style of dumplings that were actually going to be in a scene in the movie. And it's just a wonderful way to bond with your crew, and you take things from it. This lady who was teaching this is Yang Yang, who was one of our lead animators on the female characters. And she like kept taking the dumplings away from Yang Yang and doing them herself. He's like, you don't know what you're doing, which ended up being channeled into like a funny little moment in the movie that Yang Yang actually animated the shot. So, life imitates art at some point, and vice versa. And at the same time, personally for me, I got to know the country of China in a way I never would have if I hadn't moved there. This is Sophie, our amazing producer. I went 2 years ago for Chinese New Year to Wuhan and hung out with her family, and they were amazing, and they were so welcoming, and they just fed me food until I almost died, which is my dream because Chinese food is the best food in the world. Actually, you'll see a lot of food photos in this. April, who I mentioned before, came over for like, I don't know, several months to work with us in China. She speaks Mandarin and her family's from there. So we ate a lot of food together. This was the most delicious rabbit stew I've ever had. The more I looked at it, the takeout container for the rabbit stew was a little macabre. He looks a little bit like existential horror when you zoom in. But there are just so many things like that, so many details of a country that you cannot get if you're not there living it every day. I got to go to Iban on one vacation and just see the bamboo forest there in Sichuan province. And this is an ancient temple on a cliffside that just blew my mind. That also happened to have an engraving of an ancient soldier that looks exactly like Arthur. So I sent him that to make fun of him. And I think maybe the most important thing for me as the director was that every day, this was my walk. So I would walk home from the office every day through, in Xiamen, the city the movie was made, it's pretty modernized now. But there are old neighborhoods still, just like what we reflect in the movie. And I would walk through them every night. And it would like recharge my battery. I'd just walk through them and see the coolest shit. And you would have these contrasts, just like you see in the movie, just like we talked about at the beginning. We're eating bananas out of the back of a truck in this little alley in this old Shikumen type neighborhood. And then above you is like these skyscrapers. They just look like spaceships that landed from another time. I started keeping the little journal because you see everything happens on a scooter in Xiamen. So like I just did this series of drawings of various family stories that I would see on the back of scooters. Parents and girlfriends and coworkers, and these crazy contrasts, the old China, new China, really angsty teenagers who have to ride with their parents. I also learned a little bit of Mandarin, so I wasn't too embarrassed. These are some examples of how that can go wrong. If you speak Mandarin, this will be obvious. If you don't, just look at these characters at the top, and they're very similar. I recently came to Xiamen. That's what I thought I was saying to people. I was pronouncing it wrong with the wrong tone, so I was telling people I'm currently a college door, which made everyone very confused. The other thing I was trying to say was I studied Mandarin for a while. I was very proud of learning the sentence, and I would say it to my animators at work, but I was pronouncing it wrong, so I was saying every night I said that it was difficult to suck for an hour. So you can see how this can go wrong. Probably my favorite thing that I did, stupid move, was when I first got there, I was really confident, like I'm just going to absorb the language, it's going to be great. And I was in a restaurant and I had no idea how to say excuse me. So I was just watching people, and I would see people, they'd raise their hand and they'd say Fu Yan. And as soon as they said that, the staff would come over. And so I was like, oh, that's how you say excuse me. So I tried it. I raised my hand, I said Fu Yan. And it worked. I'm like, great, now I know how to say excuse me in Mandarin. What Fu Yan means is like basically waitress or like wait person. But for the next month, I was going around Xiamen, like I would I would bump into somebody on the street and I'd be like, oh, Fu Yan, excuse me. Or I'd like try to squeeze into an elevator and I'd push somebody aside and be, oh, Fu Yan. I'm basically going around China saying waitress to all these people and embarrassing myself. It was, as you guys are now experiencing, a ton of time spent on Skype. This was me showing things to Arthur and getting his opinion from China. When you've run out of steam and you're too tired, you hope that your crew can carry you on. This is Shelly, my production designer on the China side, who's bailing me out when I'm too tired to go on. This is Jimmy on our last session of recording the English dialogue. This was the entire Mandarin dub had to be done remotely because at that time when we were recording everybody, I could no longer go back to China. This was back in January. So this was like 20 straight days of recording from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day. And we have a wonderful cast on the China side, a couple of young talents to do our voices there. This is this great young actor named Yujin Feng, who was amazing, and this wonderful young actress, Vivian Tian, who does the girl. And they were really great. They're both pretty famous over there now, up and coming stars, but they would make time to come in and record together so they could do some of the natural improv that goes in the movie. And then finally, we got to score the movie. We found an amazing composer, and we did a lot of great stuff, I think, to incorporate some authentic Chinese instruments like the pipa and the sheng, but not in a cheesy way. We would like run them through synthesizers and process them. So we wanted to modernize them and kind of have a score that felt like it was not old-timey, but had some DNA from some of those instruments that are unique to China. Go down to New Zealand with the New Zealand orchestra and record the score, which was one of my favorite parts because I love music. So we had this entire concert hall to ourselves, and I cried. And then we were done. This was the last day of animation. I think one of the, for me, when I look back on this, and I think it's something for all of us who work in animation to consider, at some point it can start to really feel like it's just a career, right? This is work, it's a job, and what's your portfolio and what's your resume and what movies have you worked on and how much money did they make at the box office? But I think something I learned on this journey also is, look, it's your life, right? This was 6 years of my life. And so if it had just been a job, it wouldn't be worth it. But instead, all these people that came together to make this movie, they become your family essentially, and they're from all parts of the world. You never would have met these people through any other mechanism. They make your movie better than you could have imagined it. You watch them grow. Some of these animators had never done feature work before, and the work they do in the movie, I think, stands up there with anything that I saw at DreamWorks. So that for me was, that life experience turned out to be as important, and I think it would do us all some good to look at our careers that way and remember that that this is life is short, and these are the kind of relationships you make, and hopefully cool memories you get to make along the way that are as important in some way as what comes out of it. And at the end of it, we finished the movie about everything's done as of a couple months ago. And I look forward to, I believe the movie is slated to be released in China at the end of this year now. They had obviously the same issues that we do. So November, December looks like it will be released, and the international US side, who knows, TBD based on all of our struggles. But it takes me all the way back to that kid 6 years ago who I interviewed, and he's what is he? He's like 17 now, and he'll probably go see this movie. It'll get a big push over in China. He'll never know, I don't think, but hopefully it will speak to him in the way that I hoped it would. And I get to go watch it with Ben and Michael, who were the people who introduced me to their culture and opened the door to their lives, which made all of this possible. So hopefully that gives you guys some insight into all the different aspects of it and the long ass 6 years.
a new recording, and here we are with Q&A with Chris Appelhans about Wishdragon. We've got another half hour, so if Chris is available and you're available, we're here. So,
could I ask a question about the base studio in China?
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you pulled a lot of people from Pixar and from America, like established artists, but would like, is there, I know there's so much talent already in Southeast Asia, so is it like worth applying when you're kind of starting out to be over there?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think the in terms of like one of your first jobs being someplace like that. That's a question. Sorry, I don't think I totally understand it. It's sort of, you're asking if it's worth applying to jobs at those studios?
Yeah, so I've moved over there before, and I've been looking for like animation studios to work for.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm sure you guys have seen this in the world of visual development and art. In fact, we had some really great freelance artists, both in animation and in biz dev. We had this wonderful biz dev artist named Vic in Thailand. He had a small team, and their studio did some great stuff for us through the whole length of production, really high quality stuff. And we also did some work with, I forget the name, Monk, which is an animation studio in Thailand. And they were they had not done a lot of feature level stuff, and they weren't quite at the technical level yet, but they learned so fast, and they got so good so fast. We were like, oh my God, we love these guys. So I think, and there's so much growth of talent, so many people learning the craft online now, that the talent pool over there is really growing. And I think the quality of what they're doing, if you guys saw in the jaw, there's a lot of things about it that are sort of disjointed visually, but there's some really amazing work too. I think as a place to have meaningful career work, it's awesome. And you get to live in another part of the world, and you know, in some cases too, you get to work. Some of those artists, like at Monk, or even some of the artists on our team in China at the base team, you know, they had no feature experience. And by the end of let me see if I have Soon Hong, one of our animators, she was we gave her the most improved award. She had never done feature before. And by the end, we were giving her like key shots with the dragon with like 3 days to do them. And so I think some of those opportunities as an artist, it's a real chance to make some levels up in your career without the bureaucracy. If you're working at DreamWorks and you're an intermediate animator, you know, you're in a long line of people to have the fun shots.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So it gives you a neat opportunity sometimes to prove yourself, you know, at a level that you might have to wait longer at a bigger studio to get those opportunities. So definitely worth a shot.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The movie looks incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Who's the artist of the movies? Sorry. The color key, it's amazing.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who's the artist because I want to follow her. I love painting, so that inspires me a lot.
Shelley Wan, W-A-N. I wish I had more of her stuff I could show you. I only have some. I don't have a lot of the production stuff because it's all on the server in China. But Shelley she did this. Yeah,
Shelley, wow.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, those colors are amazing. I love it.
Yeah, so good.
There's such great colors. Wonderful stuff.
And there's a lot of things, you know, it's a very graphic movie, which is harder to do than other styles. That's why you don't see a lot of movies. It takes more craft to keep things more graphic, the way that Pixar or Disney does. So to find a way to consistently do warm shadows and cool light and keep those values at the right value level so that when you squint your eyes, the poses are reading and things resonate in the right way. You know, it's really that one of the things that differentiates high level animation or high level film from medium or beginner level is the precision, that every value in this composition is so controlled so that your darkest darks, this goes back to, I would repeat things that Marshall taught me every day in lighting dailies, which is, where are your darkest darks and your lightest lights? Are they near your focal point? How are your edges controlled so that your hard edges, your sharp edges are where you want the audience to look? And the difference between a good and a bad movie sometimes can be knowing where to look, knowing what's important, having your cuts and your art direction to flow coherently. So I think there were so many principles of design and storytelling that cross over when you start out as a painter and end up as a filmmaker.
Is there any training program? I mean, if someone like me that I'm a graphic designer, but I do illustration all my life.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, now I'm teaching at the university, but I want to do future movies. So here I'm in Peru. So here it's kind of difficult sometimes because there's it's something that is growing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that's growing. But is there any opportunity for a training program for someone that already have a career but wants to improve and learn more?
Definitely. I think it's the coolest thing, you guys, honestly, about the modern animation industry is, and this is only being sort of accelerated by all of the Zooms, all of the coronavirus stuff. There's this crazy, really crazy ability now for people to learn remotely. And so there are great classes. People like Rad, all those storyboards I showed you, he teaches storyboarding classes. People like Shelley or Arthur will teach an online painting class, for color keys, things like that. A lot of it happens through like schoolism and Bobby stuff. Other things happen through independent artists. But honestly, when you find an artist and you see work and you say, I want to do something like that, either with that artist directly or by just sort of feeling out the network of other artists that are related to them or do similar work, you can find mentors or classes that you can take remotely now in a really incredible way, which is so great because it means all you need is talent and dedication. You don't need to be in some geographic location. It used to be you just had to be in Burbank, and now you can be in Peru. So absolutely, you should totally do that. And it's not very studio based. It's pretty much.
They're so little, but you have to know the owners and all these things.
Exactly.
So that's the difficult thing.
Yeah, and like Vic, who worked for us in Thailand, he is just a really dedicated, talented artist, and he wanted to work at a high level in feature. He's doing work as a visual development artist that is more advanced right now than anything that the animation studios in Thailand can do. So it's like if you're an NBA player, like you're so good at basketball that nobody else in Peru is competition, so you have to go play in the NBA, right, to get better. Or if you're a soccer player in Peru, you don't want to come play in America because there are better teams in Peru. But it's very possible that if the industry in your country isn't advanced enough yet, that you can still become a professional part of that industry because it's so decentralized now, which is so cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a question. Well, I see that a lot of your concept is on 2D, and I was wondering why the ending movie was in 3D. How do you choose?
There's very little, it's more of a market thing than anything. There's very little investment in 2D animation anymore. You just can't get people to spend money on it, especially not this much money. So something happened where the audiences decided that 3D was better and more advanced. And so with some, you have your wonderful exceptions like Song of the Sea or something that's able to get made in 2D at a feature level, but it's very rare. It's really hard to get investment, which is funny because what nobody realizes is so much of what we do, for example, in this movie, is try to make it 2D again, right? We work so hard to make it read in a clear and cool and entertaining way in 2D. And people think, oh, cool, it's so cute and simple and three-dimensional, and have no clue that really we're mostly sort of inspired by the original 2D stuff. But yeah, it's just not feasible right now for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But that's going to change. It'll come back.
Yeah, it's great.
Hope for.
You got the insight to figure you're using one medium, and why not use the strengths of the other approach?
Yeah.
Into it. So many people that work in 3D, it takes a while before they even see how they've neglected the flatness of the design, and you went in with that awareness.
Yeah. Well, and when you're animating at a high level, you are holding yourself to the exact principles of early Disney, right? Straight versus curve, silhouette, line of action, clarity of composition and flow. And those are principles that go back to old figure drawing. Those are principles that go back to Howard Pyle, that go all the way back to Michelangelo. So I think there's a through line of the principles that are timeless. And if you keep checking your work against those principles, it's going to hold up pretty well if you do it. If you're just looking at the latest render or the latest kind of design trend in animation, it's not going to age as well.
Yeah. Good thinking, Chris. Great job. Anyone else?
Any other questions, guys?
We were just talking about the mom. She has a spoon. Is that
Yes.
a spoon? A wooden spoon?
Oh yeah.
Jesus!
There's a lot of domestic violence in a cute way. I like it.
We are okay with that. We are Latins, Latin America with that. The chancla.
It was funny. There were several times with the family dynamics where, a lot of my friends growing up since college have been Korean American, Chinese American. So I got to know their families and seen that dynamic. And it's just I think in Asian culture in general, your ways of expressing love are more subtle. You give people food, and you take care of them, and you push them. You don't do quite as much, hey sweetheart, give me a hug stuff as I'm used to as a white kid. So I tried to write some of that into the story and really make the mom tough. And at some point I had some of the Chinese crew read it, and I'm like, am I like going too far? Because I mean, she's pretty tough on her son, and like the only reason she loves him is because she's constantly feeding him and caring about his future. And they read them, they're like, oh no, she's being way too nice. What are you doing? Like, no, she needs to be a lot tougher on him. So I think that was a great lesson. And the nice thing is, we have screened the movie for Western audiences. We had a period before all the COVID stuff, we had mostly finished the movie, and we did a bunch of test screenings in Arizona and Kansas and London. And I think a lot of the executive team was really nervous because they're like, we have no idea how this story will translate to people who aren't from China. And it was the movie had the best scores out of those previews that any Sony movie had gotten before. And I think that's because, honestly, people do show love in different ways. They experience the world in different ways. And there's things about China that are very strange. But all the stuff we're talking about here about the struggle of the modern world and competition and money and family values, everybody deals with that shit in their own way. And everybody's parents worry about their future, and every kid tries to figure out how to stay themselves as they grow older. And so I think if we've done it right, and hopefully we have, then that people will be entertained by the specificity of the mom, right? That she doesn't say "I love you" to her son. She shows him in some other way, but they get it. It's basically as if it's been spoken, you know. And I think that's why we need to make movies like this. That's why it's so wonderful to see a more diverse set of stories being told, because as people have pointed out to me, the rest of the world has spent the last 100 years watching movies about white Americans and totally relating to them and enjoying them, right? We've watched enough animated movies about white people, and it's not like the rest of the world is like, I don't get it, they're white, I can't relate to this. They felt the emotions and the story. So the reverse is totally true. A bunch of people in Arizona can sit and watch a story about a kid from Shanghai and totally connect to it. So we should make more of these movies. And I think it's great that's happening.
Yay.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it's got to happen.
I haven't even seen the movie, and I can relate to the boy already.
Good.
Because the newspaper and the mom, like, I will hit you. and the wooden spoon, Jesus, my mother, Jesus.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a preview in Mexico City, and that was one of our highest scores. They really loved it, the sort of family element. There's this dynamic, in less so in modern China, but in these old Shikumen neighborhoods, these old communal neighborhoods, where everybody's just, yeah, you're not related, but you're basically all family. So like your neighbor has no problem walking in to your apartment in her underwear and borrowing your toothbrush, or this lady who's not your grandma, you know, telling you what you should do, you know, what major you should do in college. And I feel like that's a universal thing in some countries still.
Yeah, in the part of Central America, the thing that you just said is an everyday, because my neighbors are like that, and they are like so friendly, and I can go there like, okay, I need, you know, my pot just broke, can I borrow yours? I need, we are doing a party, well, all the neighborhood is invited.
Yeah, and that in China especially, one of the things that I think I wish we could have done the movie a little faster, because I think we're a little behind the curve, but in terms of what it's like to be a young person in China, so many of them are living through this change, and they had a childhood that was in this world, and now they're having adulthood that's in this world. And there's a lot of things about old China that were really hard, right? That it wasn't fun to share a bathroom, or to not have air conditioning, or there's lots of annoying things about having neighbors up in your business. But also there's something pretty lonely about a lot of modern Chinese life. And I think that, again, that's parallel exists for everybody in all countries.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, I got a quick cue if you got time.
Of course.
Cool. First of all, congratulations. I got in here late, so just catching up. But yeah, I was always really impressed with your color harmony and lighting and your viz dev work. So awesome. Any big aha moments that you had, or things that helped you improve a lot?
Oh gosh, I have to think back to when I still had time to paint.
Are you more
you know, I think one of the most important things that I learned that has always served me well, and the things that Marshall would teach you this in his class, and people like Justin Sweet or Vance Kovacs, you know, who were mentors of mine early on. You see it in their work constantly, but you see it in all good color and lighting design. It is the fucking mystery of how colors relate to each other. The fact that, for example, in this painting, you would think that that's purple on the top plane of his shirt, but it's not, it's gray. And you would think that you think what you're seeing in some area like this is, you know, green, but it's not, it's whatever, it's a very desaturated red, or vice versa. So because we have the joy of Photoshop and color pickers, I think it's one of the things that got me over the hump color-wise, was to realize that at the end of the day, if I've done it right, a bunch of colors are going to look like colors that they aren't really. They're going to seem like a color because of the relationship, and that means that you can have all kinds of subtlety, and you're not just stuck with primary colors that the grass is green, the bark is brown, the sky is blue, the concrete is gray. You know, the concrete at the right time of day is pink, and the tree can be pink, and the sky can be pink. Anything can be any color at any time, depending on the relationships.
Right.
And once you make that breakthrough, you suddenly look at all the color work that you always admired, and you're like, oh shit, they were totally doing all these tricks, and that's why I couldn't make my work look like theirs until I figured that out.
Cool.
So yeah, I think that's a big breakthrough when you finally get there.
Nice. Thank you.
Chris, can you go back two slides to the one that had the hot yellow in the left-hand side?
Sure.
And did you do a sketch? Did you do a thumbnail or a comp in black and white before that artist? And do you remember which artist did this?
Ooh, I'm gonna get in trouble.
Yeah. Forgive me, because I know they can get mixed up. Was this from a sketch?
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you show us that?
I don't know if I have my sketch for this one. No, although, well, this is a good example. This is one of the drawings that Rad made when we were on location. And he was obsessed with this like accoutrement of like, it's hard to see here, but basically everything that we think of as being like a bathroom or a kitchen or a private space is shared. So the sink, there are these old concrete sinks, and they'll have two families' toothbrushes, and then somebody's slippers stored underneath, and then a bucket with full of somebody else's, tarp that they cover their roof with. And so drawings like these would be kind of fuel when we were no longer on location. And Rad, like when Rad would board things, I wish I could show you guys more of his boards. There were so many of those details of the set. And then when that storyboard would make its way to the art department, they would be inspired to follow through on those choices. And they would go off and research them. And some people, like some of our art department, were Chinese American, so they knew exactly, but other people were like, what the heck are these concrete sinks? And they go look at the photo reference and see that there's moss growing on them and all the great details. So I think the chain of inspiration was, whether it was a drawing straight from the art department or from a storyboard artist or from me, was always kind of the same. If you got a detail in there that was special, then it would inspire people to further down the line. And also just, these are all the mailboxes, all the shared mailboxes. And this is the way that, like, I guess you would say, like, if you're a plumber and you want somebody to hire you as a plumber, you just spray paint your name, plumbing name and number on the wall of the, it would be like just, when you see those light poles in LA and they're covered in business cards and flyers. So just all those little details that on some level, they kind of fly by when you watch the movie, but especially for a Chinese audience, that makes the difference between authentic and not. And I mean, I won't bag on other movies, but I've certainly seen a number of movies that are ostensibly set in China that have a few details in it here and there. But even as a person who just lived there for a couple of years, I look at them and think, this is a very Western take on things. And honestly, to be totally honest, I think if an actual Chinese director made this movie, it would be 1,000,000 times more authentic than what I made. So there's levels, I guess, to it.
I think that even a person outside the culture that is seeing things that aren't familiar with to them, but that seem right, it happens whenever you go to a new place. You don't understand, but it's like they obviously understand it, and there is some sensation of logic to it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that Ang Lee made Brokeback Mountain, right? And he brought a different point of view to the Western landscape. That's where I grew up, like Idaho, Wyoming. And I looked at that cinematographer, I'm like, this is fucking amazing. And it's done in a way that he sees it in a different light as an outsider. And I had several experiences in China where early on, I'm pitching this movie and I'm like, And one of the best things about this movie is the whole world gets to see what contemporary China is like through the stylized lens. And the Chinese executives or investors would be like, what? Nobody wants to see China. What? Why is that a good thing? Nobody's that interested in China. I'm like, are you crazy? Do you know how interesting this place is? And they didn't see it. To them, this was just Shanghai, just another thing happening in the background. And to me, I'm like, this is like a piece of surreal art from Dali. Like, this is wild. So on some level, there is an advantage to, or not an advantage, but you have the ability to observe things differently when it's as an outsider, basically.
Yeah, that was pointed out by a cinematographer in that documentary on Visions of Light, that how many cinematographers come from other cultures, because when they come to a culture as a foreigner, they have a fresh eye.
Yeah, and it's very scary too, because if you're wrong about it, you look like a fool, and it stressed me out a lot. I remember right before I moved to China, I was watching some K-pop videos, and I forget who it was, one of these K-pop groups. Clearly, we're obsessed with like American diners. So they wanted to do a music video themed around an American diner, but everything was like a little off. Like yes, it was in a diner, but like the cowboy outfits were kind of wrong, and like the cars were wrong, and the light was wrong, and it just seemed really wrong and sort of silly. And I thought, oh no, this is what it must feel like for so many cultures to have their, because I'm thinking of as American, like, I know what a diner, that doesn't look like that. This is ridiculous. And I looked at my own movie like, oh my God, I couldn't sleep for a night. And I'm like, is this what I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, your awareness that you could be doing that may have kept you from.
I think it bailed me out. And also, what I love about my Chinese crew is they're pretty shy. It's really hard to get them to volunteer their opinion, but when you finally do, they're brutally honest. So if I was off base, I would have to prod them for a long time to finally have them say, yeah, actually, that doesn't make any sense. That my mom would never say that. So that was important. If they weren't willing to be honest, I would have done a lot of stupid things.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up. And you all have the option to continue elsewhere or at another time. Chris, thank you. You directed a feature animation film. You did a 6-year project where you worked with old friends and made new friends and pulled it off. And your coolness with it and your ability to carry through that long and keep your cool head and your vision and create the harmony on a team that big, it's just amazing to me. I am so
thank you.
And this was wonderful to have you walk us through it. Thank you very much. And
my pleasure. Thank you guys. I hope it was fun.
Okay.
Take care.
It was the best.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Gracias. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was amazing.